Hello YouTube and welcome back to X-Plane 11. Thank you very much for joining me in this video. Last time out we were taking a look at Vulkan for the very first time. I was doing a very quick demonstration. I say quick, it was actually a fairly lengthy demonstration of the differences between OpenGL and Vulkan when we were looking at the shaders, and we were looking at the frame rate, we were looking at the stutters, we were looking at things like just the way it was actually being rendered. The actual world was being rendered, and we did see a number of differences. I mentioned in there that I had ReShade running in there, as I did with OpenGL and Vulkan, but the Vulkan one had to be set up a little bit differently. There have been a few comments asking me about what my ReShade settings are, so I thought I'd do another video showing how to install ReShade, slightly different for Vulkan, and what my settings are, what I use, and some of the things that ReShade can and cannot do. Some of the things that no longer seem to work, which may work in the future, but at the time of me making this video, no longer work. So make sure you stay tuned for that to see, for example, this, which is perfectly great, go to something like this, which I think does look quite a lot more realistic. Maybe needs a little bit more brightness in it, but overall that looks quite realistic. So once again, from that to that with no frame rate change at all. Alright, so here we are. This is the first place that we need to go. This is where we download ReShade from. This is reshade.me. Link will be in the description box. And as you can see, it does tell you on the first page, on the home page, what it is. It is a generic post-processing injector for games and video software. So you're looking at ambient occlusion, real depth of field effects, color correction, etc. And it uses both frame color and depth information, and it just makes it happen. So you can see there's a lot of things that can be used. Some of it does work, some of it doesn't work, some of it works in OpenGL, some of it works in Vulkan. I'm sure things will be more and more will work in Vulkan as time goes on, as the sim works. Certain things will work in certain titles as well. So what we do is we just go down to the bottom and download the latest version. So at the time of recording, the latest version is 4.5.4. Once we've downloaded that, I have it stored right here. All we have to do is double click it. Now, if you already have ReShade installed on your computer or on the OpenGL version of X-Plane, you need to uninstall that first before you do anything. So click here, select the game, find your X-Plane, click OpenGL and press no. That should remove it, and to ensure that it has removed it, you should see there's normally a DLL in here, some ReShade stuff. One of them would be saying OpenGL.dll or something like that. Make sure and verify that is gone. If that is not gone, this will not work at all. For those people who have OpenGL and want it in OpenGL, you just need to click OpenGL and press yes, and then those things will appear, as well as you'll also get that folder appear there, reshade-shaders, and probably a reshade.ini. So that's how you need to do that. For other people, so if we're not working in this one, I'm just going to close that. We'll open it. The first thing you need to do is press enable/disable ReShade in Vulkan globally, because instead of doing this on a per game basis now, Vulkan you enable on a global basis. So you'll need to click on this, and you might get a user account control message like that, and just make sure that that checkbox is ticked. You then select the game. As you can see, it's picking up a bunch of games. Select X-Plane 11, press Vulkan, and then you'll get a number of effects to install. Now, as you can see, I have not installed all of them. As a matter of fact, initially I did install all of them, and then I've just deleted a bunch, but there are a number of them that I have left on. You can install any you want, but if you want to wait for a while, I'll be able to show you in the sim which ones I am actually using, and then you can see which ones you can and cannot install. Be aware that some of these work some of these seem to fail randomly, and some just flat out do not work at this point in time with X-Plane 11. I'm going to cancel that because I already have it installed. You just press OK and it'll come up with, it'll install it, and then it will say ReShade installation was successful. That's as far as we need to go on that. Now I'm going to jump into X-Plane again, and we'll go through the ones that I'm using and why I'm using them, and also how important it is for you to do this all together. So for example, we cannot just remove one part of the reshade setting, certain ones anyway, and expect it to look the same. So you can use these and combine them to give you the look and the effect that you want. Here we are back in X-Plane. I'm going to try and get a more decent view like that, for example. I'm going to leave all the lights on and all of that for a very specific reason. I've also left the engine running just so there's something to enjoy, some noise apart from my droning voice. Now you can have a droning engine instead. Let's see what does and does not work. Now I believe the initial key is insert for reshade. I have set mine to Shift and F2, so I press Shift and F2 and this is what comes up. Now I'll explain all of this in a while, but first I'm going to go over to the settings. So this is where we change it. So overlay key, you press that, you put in your new key. I have the scroll lock as the key that switches it on and off, as you can see. I have nothing for reloading, presets or next because I do not tend to use those. It finds the effects itself. You can put the effects wherever you want, it will do it. And then you've got your screenshots path. I've just got e-screenshots. I save it as .pngs, lossless format, so you're okay with that. Better than .bmps. You'll get much smaller images, but you can just save .bmps if you want. You can do before and after images if you want to do comparisons. I do not need to do that. Show screenshot message, I tend to disable this. I had it on in the last video, but I tend to disable that so that when I take a screenshot it doesn't just come up on the screen telling me, oh, by the way, you've taken the screenshots. I know, I press the button. And then you can change your style of editor if you wanted. For example, like that. You can change anything you wanted. Solarize dark, solarize light. I just like the dark one. That's just easy to manage, easy on the eyes. So there we go. We'll now move on to this, and these are the ones that I currently have enabled. These are all the other types that you can have. Some of them may work, some of them might not. For example, Vibrance does work, and I might keep that. In fact, I'll move that to the top and I might use that. Okay. First thing I am going to show you is I'm going to pull up the frame rate indicator. There you go. Now take a look at the frames with its on and off, and as you can see there is a difference of maybe 1 frame, if that. So that is really good. Let's go ahead and I'm going to switch all of these off, and then one at a time I'm going to enable them and give you a sort of a good look at what they do. And for this I am actually going to do let's do that, and then I'll move it around. No need to have the frame rate indicator anymore. Let's move this onto this side. You can see we've got the Vulkan tab up there as well. Now I'll close all of these and we'll get rid of everything that's currently here. You can see how things are changing as I get rid of stuff. So there we go, we're now in the standard mode. First thing I'm going to switch on, SMAA. Now this doesn't seem to work brilliantly, but it is working, and you can notice it very clearly. If you look along that line there going onto the tail, you will notice SMAA at work, smoothing things out. Now I can change these to color edge detection, which works a little bit better there, and depth edge detection. Now the depth edge detection is not working currently. The reason being, depth detection does not seem to be working in X-Plane with Vulkan at this moment in time. That's also why depth of field effects currently do not work. So you can use luminance or color depending on what you want. That's made that nice and smooth. You can change this around as much as you want. For example, we'll have corner rounding more or less, or whatever you want on this. The edge detection, threshold, increase, decrease will all play some part. I think that was at 144 for me. I've been messing around with this a little bit. It's not perfect at the moment, but it's better. Oops, do not do that. So there you go, you can see quite clearly it does do something. You can even see that at the top of the hill. Smooths out at the top of the hill. The next one I then add on top of this is FXAA. So that's fast approximate anti-aliasing. And when you add that, it does a little bit more. So you can see again on that edge, it's quite obvious. I do not have the thresholds really high, but it does help somewhat. And it's also a little bit obvious if you have a look at the shadow on the tail. You can actually see between the two, look at that tail shadow, and then SMAA and the FXAA make that shadow of that tail a lot smoother. So there you go, that's what those two do. I'm going to close all of these as we're putting them on. This one here, everyone knows what this effect is. This effect is the sort of darkening effect around the edge, normally caused by a lens. So it's I think it's pronounced vignette effect. So that effect all around the lens is useful, but also can be annoying. Now you're probably wondering, why am I using that? Well, it also darkens across the screen a tiny bit, and later on with the other ones I've combined these together, that darkness works really well, or that slight darkening across the screen with these particular settings works really quite well. The next one I add is a denoise. Now this denoise is, I'm trying to figure out whether it's going to be visible anywhere. If you look closely over in the distance there's a slight visibility of it, and all it does is it just tries to clear up any amount of graininess in a sense. So when you have noise on a picture, you're talking about spots that maybe the colours aren't matching properly, and it looks like a splatter of let's say you put a splatter of paint across it, very fine splatters of paint, or very fine particles of sand that are partly see-through, and they're giving you a really weird texture. That's noise. So this tries to blend that or smooth that all out, and it also helps slightly with the anti-aliasing when you do something like that. So I've got that on. Works really well when I used to use this in Assetto Corsa. After that, I add in a little bit of sharpening. Now you'll notice immediately the sharpening, you have these edges suddenly become just that little bit sharper. So nothing too major, as you can see on the adaptive sharpening, it's 0.29, nothing major. I then add a second bit of sharpening. That's one. Again, on and off, giving you a look. And that is set at 0.5 with a 1.34 radius and 0.914 clamping. I might play around with these settings in the future, but that's what we have. So that's given me all the sharpening I tend to need. I do not use any more sharpening beyond this. So far we've gone from that to that. So you can see colour wise we haven't changed much. We've just got the effect around the edge and the slight darkening across the screen, but you can see things slightly sharper in certain places and smoothness of certain lines. So that's where we are currently. Now we're going to start playing around with the colour itself. I add this one in. This one's a really nice one. As you can see, it immediately starts changing up the colours. The whites become more white, the blue starts becoming more blue, the clouds become more white. The greens, however, tend to do something slightly weird. They become more green, but there's also more blue within the greens. So that's something that we might need to fix. The grass does become more alive, but this grass, which should probably be a little bit more yellow, seems to be turning more green and more blue. As well as that, you can see it does bring some of this blue out in here as well. So that's what that one does. There are lots of different ones that we can use here. For example, you see neutral, which doesn't really do anything. We have color 1, which just looks odd. Color 2, which again looks odd. Color 3 just turns everything blue. Color 4, some sort of weird Hollywood one. Color 5, this one's not bad, but I find it a little bit too overexposed. Color 6 I do not tend to like. Color 7 just also doesn't work for me, and color 8 is the one that I quite like. We then move on, add a little bit more in. I use Technicolor. Technicolor 2 just adds that green and blue a little bit more on the green and blue, and you can see the whites become a little bit more white, but the greens start coming back. The strength isn't that high. As you can see, we could have it really high, and you see lots of green come back in, but the strength is not that high at all. I keep it down somewhere around here. There we go. And the saturation, again, not too high. We don't want to oversaturate anything, and the brightness, we do not want to make it all too bright. I then use deband, and as you can see, it tells you right there what it does. It alleviates color banding by trying to approximate original color values. So when I use deband here, it's not going to do anything, but at night this will probably help, because it will try and get rid of a whole bunch of weird banding effects that you do tend to get, particularly at night and particularly with ReShade. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The downside is it will try and blend certain textures together. So if you have a leather texture and it thinks those are banded, it will try to blend that together, and that causes a problem. So you do have to be aware of that. Next up, I use clarity. Now, clarity effects doesn't seem to be working right now. What it's supposed to do is give us a change in values and give us some clarity, but it does not seem to be currently working. I could try and stick it in vivid light, just check. Nope, clarity no longer seems to be working. It was working earlier on. Oh wait, it is working. It is working, it's just not working all too well. So I've just gone into a mask to see what we have. So you can see there, it's trying to get the metal, get some of those metal effects, some of the brightness there. I suppose clarity, it is doing something. As a matter of fact, there you go, you can see it at work. Great, it does work. As a matter of fact, I think that might actually look better than I've ever had it looking. That's cool. The metal just looks far more metallic. Like that. Okay, let's see if there's anything else I can mess around with here. So that's where the clarity actually is. I'm not sure what that then is. Doesn't really do much. We'll keep the shadows dark. We can even brighten that up all the way if we wanted to, just to show you what it does. You can actually see the light as if it's glowing, but I think that's way too much. There you go. You can see it just darkens up the forest in the distance as well, which is exactly what I wanted it to do. So that's looking pretty good. That gives us a better shadow effect. I'll then go for this one, PPFX Bloom. This is the one that makes the biggest difference. Now, I haven't got this perfectly set up, but this is the one that makes one of the biggest differences. And you can see right there what we have. I'm just going to close up Technicolor, deband and clarity, and I'll bring up the bloom. I've got this set up for log 10 logarithmic and exposure correction. That's my tone map curve. You can adjust that. Doesn't really seem to do much. The exposure will do something, as you can see. So I'll just bring that back to you around where it was. It's about there. You've got the contrast intensity, that will also do something. So you can see that looks horrible. That looks horrible. I'm quite happy with something around a bit less than that. About there. And then you've got the black saturation. So what this is going to do is it's going to sometimes, occasionally we end up with a problem where the shadows get desaturated, but this seems to be okay at this point in time. In fact, it's helping our shadows right now. So combine that with clarity, and you can see that clarity might need to be adjusted slightly. We then add in some ambient light. The ambient light is very, very subtle. So you can see, if you look carefully, it just adds a little bit of light back in from the surroundings, which I quite like. I then add in DPX, which again is very subtle, and that just makes the whites a little bit more whiter, and it just lifts the image just that little bit. Then I add in the color matrix. Now this is how we get the colors finalized almost. So you can see here that the blues just seem to be a little bit too cartoony in a way. So I click color matrix, and there we go. That's my finalized coloring. I can mess around with that a little bit if I wanted to, but I choose not to actually mess around with that. I'm actually going to leave the clarity up because I am probably going to adjust that. And then vibrance, which I found early at the start of this video. I'm not too sure about using vibrance, to be completely honest. I do not think I need it, so I'm not going to add vibrance to mine. So that's what we have. I'm just going to go through the clarity and make a slight adjustment on it again, because with the PFPX bloom it is making things a little bit too dark. I think that's probably about right. Now we could do we could stick that on soft light if we wanted to, or overlay. Let's have a look. What other kinds do we have? Hard light, multiply, vivid, linear. Linear light doesn't look right. Linear light does not look right. So I'm going to go for either soft light. I think soft light is the one to go for here. There we go, because it is the sun. So that's all done, and that is my setup. So as you can see, we've gone from this, which is perfectly fine, to this, which I think just looks that little bit better. What other things can you do with this? Well, as I said, we can have depth of field, but they do not seem to be working. I'll give you an example. This is the one I tend to use, and as you can see, it just does not work. It's something else is coming up on the screen. It is trying to do something, but it's just not panning out as it's currently supposed to. So that's currently off. We can add in chromatic aberration, and if you have a look on the edge of the screen, it gives us some chromatic aberration, which is caused by a lens, and you end up with sort of red-green twisting of the lights, similar to perhaps a rainbow, that kind of effect on the edge. It's something that photographers tend to sometimes fix, and so it just gives you a more realistic, pure photo. You can actually see there, you've got the red on that side up to the green, the blues on that side. So that's caused by a lens when you're taking a photo. You have colourfulness, which again can be used, but I do not need to. You've got curves, depth, haze, display depth. A lot of the depth ones will not work, as nor will emphasize, because it cannot figure out what it needs depth to figure out what's going on. Film grain, you can add film grain if you want to take a picture and make it look like a film. Filmic pass if you really wanted to. I tend not to use this, but you can if you wanted to. You can use HDR if you wanted HDR. Again, it's fake HDR, but it can be used. For example, I don't know, I mean that could potentially be, that could potentially look alright for HDR. In fact, I might actually pop that one in. I'm just looking at that and thinking that could, you know what, I'm going to add that. High power sharpening, no longer needed because I'm using other sharpenings. This one I don't think loads half the time. It's loaded this time. Once again, it does not work because of depth of field issues. It cannot figure out what the depth is. We can use layers, levels, all that kind of stuff. Again, levels is a good one to use, but it's not something you need to use all the time. So I could say, well look, I want the black point down, but I want the white points higher, and you know, messing around with that, it would give us another kind of effect. But to me, that tends to look too dark. That's really looking a bit too dark to fly. So I would actually, if I was using levels, I would bring this almost to nothing. It'd just be very subtle, for example, like that, if I was going to use levels. And I'll leave that in to show you that it can be used. And as you can see, also frame rates not taking a hit, as you can see, or maybe it takes a hit of 1 frame. So we've got that. Lift gamma gain is probably a better one to use over levels, to be completely honest. Then you've got the autofocus, which will not work. We're already using an LUT. We're already using blooms, again, more of those. Sharpening, we do not need. Monochrome, just turns everything into monochrome, which is nice for some photos. Fake motion blur. Yeah, fake motion blur, I do not tend to like this, as you can see. It just does not. I just do not like this. It's really not something that works with X-Plane. And maybe it's something we can try. MXAO wasn't working last time I tried. Again, it's to do with it needs to know a depth. I have a feeling it needs to know to get proper ambient occlusion. Non-local means absolutely causes the frame rate to tank. As you can see, 10 frames per second doesn't really do much. God rays is not really needed, I don't think. This one again causes the frame rate to tank, and you can see it does not work properly. Reflective bump mapping is an interesting one, but again, I do not think it works too well with X-Plane 11. Technicolor you could use, but you know, we're already using Technicolor 2. Tried it, that doesn't seem to do anything, and then that's it. So that is how I set up my X-Plane, and as you can see, it looks rather good. It really does look rather good. So I could pop along, stick all these on, switch off the parking brake, and let's go out and take off. And you can see that does look pretty good. So I'll switch it off, which is, you know, it's fine, but this just has a better color setup overall. You see that just does have a better color setup all in all. So we'll pop along the taxiway, and we'll get onto the runway, and we'll be up and away. So that is how you set up ReShade for X-Plane 11 and Vulkan, and of course OpenGL as well, but this is mainly for Vulkan, as I was showing things that do and do not work in Vulkan. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. No longer need to show the frame rate. Here we go. We're up and ready to go. Thank you very much for watching. Please remember to hit the like button if you like this video. Subscribe to the channel for more videos on X-Plane 11. I was going to say Flight Simulator. X-Plane 11. Leave a comment in the comments box below letting me know what you think. If you've got some settings, please do let me know. I'd like to hear your settings and what you get out of those settings. That would be really, really awesome. If you do want to support me on Patreon, you can do so at www.patreon.com/ecgadget. Your support would be massively, massively appreciated. It would really, really help me out. Also, you can find me on social media at ecgadgetlp for both Twitter and Instagram, and ecgadget for Reddit. That's all from me. that really does look beautiful, I think. Compared to that does look a lot better. In fact, we'll take a look outside as well. There you go. That's all from me, and I'll see you guys next time in X-Plane 11, where, well, let's see what I get up to. In fact, before I go, let me do one very quick thing, because when you're looking at reshade, sometimes you need different profiles for different uses. I'm going to see what this profile looks like if we fast forward time. I think this profile works. I do think this profile... So everything's a bit darker, but I think the profile works fairly well. So there you go. The profile has actually done what I wanted it to do. And from the outside, that does look fairly realistic. Maybe a little bit dark. That's what it would be normally. Maybe that is a little bit dark. So it might need, you might need a profile for night flying, but as you can see, now that you know my settings, now you know the kind of things that I would also do. So thank you very much once again, and I'll see you guys next time in X-Plane 11.